Alrighty, I believe I'm live now. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I remember last time I forgot to take myself off of mute. So if you can hear me, please let me know in the chat. My name is Kayla Cox. I am the owner of this here YouTube channel called 6 Miles to Supper. 6 Miles to Supper basically describes how I lost weight. I practice intermittent fasting and I walked 6 miles a day. My preferred form of practicing intermittent fasting was to eat one meal a day, what's also known as OMAD. And so it's pretty simple as far as the way I practice intermittent fasting. I just eat whatever I want in the eating window. So if I'm eating one meal a day, I just eat that one meal and I eat whatever I want at my meal. If I'm doing more of a window, the same thing. I eat whatever I want in that window. I'm not low carb. I'm not keto, nothing like that. And and that's how I've done it. I also, a couple of things that are a little bit different about how I practice intermittent fasting. I will allow myself coffee with half and half in the fasting window, and which I guess some people refer to as dirty fasting. But I want to practice this stuff in a really laid back kind of way. So let's see, I'm just going to check on the chat just to make sure that everything's good. Normally my husband does the chat, but he's not here right now. So if you have questions about intermittent fasting or about weight loss in general, or let's see, what else? Walking 6 miles a day. I'm happy to answer all of those things. Happy Groundhog Day. I guess Americans celebrate that. I don't know if other people do. Groundhog Day, if you've never seen the movie Groundhog Day, is one of my favorites. And I think that that's actually something that can apply to the weight loss journey, because one thing that actually really helps on the weight loss journey is to keep your day the same as much as possible. And so the way I practice intermittent fasting, especially when I was losing weight, it's a little bit different in maintenance. I found that in maintenance mode, you can be a bit more loosey-goosey. You don't have to be so rigid with yourself. But the thing that I found was really helpful was to basically keep my days the same. So Monday through Saturday in 2016, that was really when I got very consistent with intermittent fasting. I was not consistent before. When I got really consistent, then I was able to lose the weight. So, but what I did was Monday through Saturday, I was doing intermittent fasting. So I was just like, I'm doing the same thing every day. I wasn't super strict with like what my day looked like as far as, when I got my steps in, because it's 14,000 steps on my Fitbit. That was my rule. So I would get those in at various times during the day. Sometimes I'd like do it all in one big bunch, and then other times it'd just be throughout the day. I would get little, steps in here and there. But the intermittent fasting itself, I kept it the same. So when I was doing more of a window, I found it really helpful to do the same time every day. So for example, if I was doing like an 18-6, that's 6 hours of eating and an 18-hour fasting window, I just kept it at the same time every day, so I never had to think about it. So, for example, like, okay, between the hours of 2 and 8 each day, that's when I eat, and I don't eat otherwise. And it just helped simplify things for me. Groundhog Day, what happens is Bill Murray is the main character, and he gets kind of stuck in this rut of like every day he wakes up and it's Groundhog Day, and he just relives the same day over and over and over again, which to him is really terrible, but he ends up learning a lot. So let's see, I want to make sure I've got these chat settings right. All right, hi Lily, thanks for joining us here. So let's see, that being said, I do have a question that came in on the form, the Google form, and I thought this was a really good question, and I wanted to answer it. So the question was this: can you change your eating window several times? Meaning, if you are typically eating from noon to 8, but then one day you decide to do 11 to 7, and then on the next day you do from 1 to 9, does that work? And I'm really glad this question got asked, because I just talked about how it's a lot simpler if you just keep it the same time every day. But the thing is, life isn't ideal. like life happens. One thing I really have learned in the years since getting down to my goal weight, and then and just maintaining since then, your life changes, and sometimes you have the ability, because your days are very similar, and you can just say, okay, basically it works, 2 to 8 every day, like Monday through Saturday, and then cheat day on Sunday. That works for some people in certain parts of their lives. But then other times you may have this schedule that keeps changing. Like this person's, obviously it changes, and in my experience, is totally fine. The more important thing is that you're being consistent with the intermittent fasting. The hour of difference here, you're talking from 11 to 7 versus 1 to 9. That's just not that much difference. But I would say the more important thing to me, and I know this is not what everybody will say about intermittent fasting, but this is the way I think it works. I think the way intermittent fasting works is that it just helps you to eat the right amount of food. So, in other words, I don't think that there's a huge magical thing that happens. Like if you eat, your food in this 8-hour window versus this, 10-hour window, as long as you're eating basically the same amount of food, I don't think that it makes much difference. One big reason I think for thinking that way is that I have seen people lose lots and lots of weight, and they've done this totally different than I have. I mean, I ate one meal a day, whereas, I met a lady right after I hit my goal weight, and she had lost over 100 pounds, and she ate 6 small meals a day, and that was how she did it. And I think it's really just what you can stick with. So with intermittent fasting, the thing that really works for me is that I can do really well with time restricted eating. So what I mean by that is the idea of okay, just eat between this period of time. I'm on board with that. But the idea of restricting food, oh, you can't have carbs, or you can't have dessert, or whatever these various rules are, I'm really resistant to that, and I'm not going to stick with it. I will in the short term. I mean, I've been on, I feel like, every diet over the course of my life. I mean, I struggled with my weight when I was a kid, and it was just, it was always a struggle. I was always on a diet, or watching my weight, or gaining weight and feeling bad about it. And so finding the thing that works, because what I found for myself was I could lose the weight. Like I said, I've done lots of different things to lose weight, but the thing that always tripped me up was generally when I was losing weight, what I was doing before I found intermittent fasting was I was cutting out foods. I was like, okay, I can't have dessert, or I can't have bread, or I can't have pasta, or whatever the thing was. And so then I said, okay, and then what would happen is I would get down to my goal weight, and I would then start packing the weight back on. And what I realized was it was because I was adding those foods back in. So what I finally came to the conclusion was I just need to figure out how to eat the right amount of food. I wasn't really terribly worried about the different types of food. I mean, I feel like we've been eating bread for millennia, we haven't really worried too much about all this, which foods to eat until very recently. So I just wanted to learn how to eat the appropriate amount. So that's what intermittent fasting did for me. So it helped me to learn how to eat the right amount, because when it gets, the time gets contracted where you can eat, it makes it more difficult, though not impossible, to eat too much. It's easier to eat the right amount of food that will mean that you will lose weight or maintain, depending on what your goals are. And so that's the way I think intermittent fasting works. That's what worked for me, was that it helped me to eat the right amount of food. But again, that lady who lost 100 pounds or more than 100 pounds, she was learning how to eat the right amount too. She did it, throughout the day, eating smaller meals. I did it eating, one big meal. We were both restricting in some way, having a rule for ourselves, but it was just following that rule, I think, that works. So I don't get hung up on the idea of oh, well, you got to keep it at the same time every day. No, the main thing is that you don't let it get to a point where you're not even really doing anything, like where you're not really fasting, because it's like, well, you're cutting off your eating maybe here, but then you're eating really early in the day. And if you're not paying attention to that, in my experience, it's really easy to not be doing intermittent fasting. And so, those are my thoughts on all that. Hi everyone, My Healthy Journey for Life, and Jay McPhee is from, from Paisley in Scotland. Wow, it's so cool. Oh, and somebody else is from Egypt, Zena. Wow, it's really cool to me that people from all over the world are here and chatting. So thank you guys. If you have questions about intermittent fasting, please let me know, or any questions you have for me. I'm happy to answer. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a doctor. This is just based on my own experience of losing weight. So just to give you an overarching timeline, because I think that one thing that happens on the weight loss journey is that people get in a hurry, and they rush results. That was a big mistake I made. In 2015, I had heard about intermittent fasting, and I was like, that sounds like something that'll work. And I started kind of implementing it, starting, kind of to experiment with it. But I kept getting in a rush, and then I would quit, because I was like, I'm only losing a pound a week. I've got to find something that's going to do better than that. So I would quit, and then I would basically not do anything, like I was just like, I'll just eat less. And then I would, see the scale was not going down anymore. And then, I'd try something else, and it was just a lot of quitting. But what I found was in 2016, when I just got clear on my plan, I still lost weight slowly, about a pound a week, which, by the way, I no longer think of that as being slow. In my experience, and I've read a lot of stuff, and it seems like a pound a week is actually a really reasonable goal. It's actually kind of tough to do, especially as you get down lower. So the first bout of weight loss I did was from 222.2 pounds down to 157, 158. So that took me, I weighed myself for the first time in a very long time in February of 2015. And that first year, like I said, I lost, once I started weighing myself every day, I lost about 20 pounds, but then I injured myself doing a deadlift, and my weight started to creep back up. And I was right over 200 pounds when the end of 2015 came along. And I was pretty frustrated. I felt like quitting. And so I was like, when I look back at my spreadsheet that I've been keeping track of all my stuff on, I thought, I think my problem is that I keep quitting. It's that, I'm not incapable of losing weight. I can see that my weight will move down when I'm being consistent. So I said, okay, I guess it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot longer than I want it to. But what happened was, once I got consistent, then I was losing about a pound a week. And so then once I got down to 158, that was still about four pounds being overweight, according to BMI. So I'm 5'6", and so anything above 154 is technically overweight. But when I got down to 158, I felt really good about where I was with my weight. I felt really comfortable in my body, which, that's what I was really going for. I was not at this point in my life, because I was 30, let's see, how old would I have been at that point? In 2016, I would have been 32. And so I have 3 kids. I'm married. I'm happily married. I just wanted to feel comfortable in my body. I was not interested in being super skinny or anything like that. I didn't want to just chase a low number. So I thought, okay, I'm going to just try to maintain. I really thought, I don't know, how hard is it going to be to stick in this place? Or is it going to be like it always is? Because that was always my experience. You get down to the weight, and then it starts trending back up. So I just said, okay, I'm gonna try just maintaining. So I maintained from November of 2016 all the way till September of 2017, and that's when I started this channel. And because I wanted to just share my experience about intermittent fasting. I didn't see a lot of people talking about intermittent fasting the way I practiced it, which was just to eat what you like, to not do keto in combination with anything. Just eating, if you want chocolate, eat chocolate. If you want pasta, eat pasta. And just being laid back about it. I saw there was like a lot of like stress about it, and I just thought, well, you don't have to stress about it. And this felt like the easiest way I'd ever found to lose weight. It felt very sustainable to me. So, but when I started this channel, I thought, oh, but I'm technically overweight. Like, how can I make a video about weight loss if I'm still overweight? And I disagree with with my past self about that. I think I could have totally maintained there, and that would have been fine. And I will definitely, I always want to make it very clear. So I ended up losing from 158 down to 142. And I got down to 142, and I decided to stop. And the reason I decided to stop was I was like, okay, I've lost more weight, and I could not feel a difference. I didn't really see a difference in like how I looked in the mirror. I didn't feel a difference in like just moving around, or so it was like this point of diminishing returns for me. And the lower you get on, in weight, the less food you can eat, which means it is harder to maintain at a lower weight. And so I decided, okay, I'm just going to maintain here. I decided for myself I would maintain in the 140s. That's always been my goal since getting down to that point. And that's pretty much where I've stayed. I think my highest, I can't remember now how high my 7-day average has been over the years. I think it got as high as like maybe 152, which is still in the normal BMI for me. But it was fine with me. Like I tend to say, well, I want to stick below 150 though. Like I want to be in the 140s, because then I've got a little bit of a buffer if, life happens. Things do happen. I mean, since losing that weight in maintenance mode, I have had times where we went through an extended illness with a close family member that was very emotionally, it was just emotional. There was just a lot of sadness during one particular part. I lost my grandmother last year. And it was really hard to lose her. And so there were just things that have happened. And my weight does, has fluctuated up into the low 150s, like 152. If it gets to 153, I'm like, okay, we gotta, I go back to okay, OMAD, 6 days a week. I still always take Sundays off, and, walking 6 days a week. 6 miles, 6 days a week. Okay, so but that's been me since then. Okay, there are some questions in the chat. So, Zena had a really good comment. She said she can't have a long eating window because she eats more than normal, and she feels more comfortable with a shorter eating window. And I think that that's definitely something that a lot of people experience. I find for myself, the longer... I was unaware of this about myself. And intermittent fasting taught me that I have this tendency to always be able to justify eating. It's just, it's a little bit here, a little bit there. And I tended to be eating just out of boredom, and, and it's tricky too, because a lot of times it's I feel hungry, so I should eat something. But I've found a lot of times if I just waited and got busy doing something else, I would realize after a while, I was actually just bored, or I was actually upset about something. And so I would then learn, okay, it's not quite as simple as just, if you feel hungry, then eat, for me at least. And having that tighter window really can help. So I think everybody has to find that balance where it's they feel good, but they don't feel too restricted. And I found for me personally, doing OMAD, I don't feel restricted because I know that I get that big meal one big meal a day. And that doesn't feel restrictive to me when I'm doing that. Okay. Another question from Zena. How did you deal with binge eating? So binge eating, it feels like that word, binge, I'm not sure what people mean when they say it, because I think everybody kind of has a different take on that. I definitely know that I eat fast, and I tend to stress eat too, so I can sit there and eat a lot of food. And I didn't realize it, but again, it was one of those things intermittent fasting taught me, was that would eat way past the point of comfort, like just like I'm just eating and eating and eating, and then afterwards feeling miserable, just feeling miserably full. So how did I stop that? It was a lot harder than I thought it would be. Learning how to stop when I was full, just like as soon as I hear that voice in my head, it's like, okay, you've had enough, that's enough. I would just stubbornly for so long, like it's like I can't stop. Like I just a few more bites, and it was, I don't know if it was mainly habit. I guess that's what it was. Like, I mean, if you think about it, how many times do you eat per day? If you multiply that over the course of your life, that's a lot of instances of, being in the habit of overeating. And so one thing I think that helped was just by virtue of practicing intermittent fasting, it gave me discipline. It helped build that discipline in me to say no to myself. Like, okay, no, you've had enough. One thing that did help also, actually there are several things that helped me with that, like stopping emotional eating, and just stopping when full. I made a rule for myself that I would not do any distracted eating. One thing I saw was, it was like when I sit down in front of the TV, then I'm just eating and eating and eating. I'm not really paying attention. And so then I end up miserable. So for a lot of 2016, that was a pretty strict rule. There was an exception. We do family night, sleep on the couch night, with our kids, and we do it on Saturday nights, and we usually watch a movie, family kind of movie, and have some sort of special food, and so I was like, okay, I've got to learn how to do that. So I felt like every week I was like, okay, like one time of distracted eating, and I just need to learn. Like I need to learn how to pay attention, even when it's there's this temptation to be distracted, and I did. I eventually have learned how to be more attentive to my eating while other things are going on. But like in general, I don't have screens on. Like we sit down to supper, we don't have phones with us, no TV, other than sleep on the couch night. So it's that those are things that really help. Like just to be able to like have no distraction, just to sit down and eat. It's a lot more boring, like when you're just when you're being entertained, by the television or some sort of other screen, it's really easy to just sit there and like keep eating and eating and eating. But when you're actually paying attention to it, it's like, oh, well, I mean, I'm done eating now. So that was something that helped me. And other things too, when I'm feeling really bad, like when I'm feeling really emotional, really sad, mad, stressed out, depressed, whatever the thing is, I have found talking with people really helps, especially with my husband. Talking to a priest, I'm an Orthodox Christian, that has been very helpful also. Journaling things out also, going for a walk really helps. So like when I'm feeling those things, to just not sit down and eat, and to say, I'm going to wait. I mean, yeah, I feel like eating right now, but I'm going to wait on that and see. And that usually helps. Working through things, like if there's something stressing me out, then like figuring out how to work through that. Like, so if it's money stress, figuring out the budget. If it's something with my husband, it's like, we got to sit down and talk about this, whatever the thing is. So there you go. Let's see. Jane McPhee says, I just bought and read your book on fasting. Oh, and it's so good to hear that you can still lose without cutting all the foods you like. I lost 23 pounds about 4 months ago and 6 weeks of fasting doing OMAD. All right. Congratulations, Jane. That is awesome. Thank you for mentioning my book. I'm the worst marketer ever, but my husband says I have to do, he's like, just show him your book. So this is the book she's talking about, The Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting. I wrote that several years ago about intermittent fasting, how I practice it, and all that. So it's just in a handy dandy format. It's on Amazon as an ebook and as an ebook and paperback, and also it's an audible audiobook read by me. So and in the description there should be links for all that stuff. But Jane, that is awesome. You said you lost 23 pounds in in 6 weeks. You lost 23 pounds. Wow, that is really, really fast. But you've hit a plateau. Okay. All right. So you've hit a plateau, and I'm curious if you don't mind sharing. Are you still doing OMAD? Um, and are you being really consistent with that? Um, one thing I've definitely found about plateau, everybody's weight plateaus from time to time, and my personal theory. Again, I'm not a doctor, but this is just my own personal theory. Um, is it? I feel like it's like your body's way of saying, "Look, okay, I, I, I see that you're losing a lot of weight, and I just want to keep you safe. And so let's make sure you're sure that you want to continue to lose weight. And from a biological standpoint, the reason we carry around weight is so that we don't starve in famine. So I do think our bodies do sometimes plateau just to kind of tap the brakes and say, is this something you are really wanting to do, or and the body's always just trying to keep you safe. That's the way I think about it. Sometimes what I've found with plateaus is, and this was a lot of times why I would plateau, is because, and this was more like 2015, I would be in a rush. I would have like one or 2 days where the weight stayed the same or it went up, and then I would panic, and then I'd be like, okay, I got to change this stuff, and I kept changing everything. I didn't just stay consistent. Okay, so. Okay, I see that now. Okay, you're still doing OMAD, and you're walking 4 to 6 miles each day. So here's what I would offer to you. You didn't really ask me, but so you said you've lost 23 pounds, and that was like 4 months. So you started 4 months ago. So really, 16 weeks is what we're saying that you've been doing this, and you've lost 23 pounds. That is really good, and I know people don't like to hear me say like a pound a week, just like go for a pound a week. I would say just keep going with what you're doing. And I think over time, you'll end up averaging out, where you want to be. And another thing too, I don't think I mentioned this, like as you get down to a lower weight, for me, weight loss really slowed down. So that time where I went from 158 down to like 142, I was losing a third of a pound a week on average. So it basically took me a year to lose that amount of weight. I think that's right. Sometimes the timeline gets a little bit muddied in my head, but so I would just say, if you're feeling like, oh, why is it still plateauing? The plateau eventually breaks. Just continuing to be consistent. Although I will, another thing obviously to mention is that if, you continue and it's like, it continues to stay right, where you're at. If you're unhappy with the weight, maybe you're at a good weight and it's where you need to be. But if it's not where you need to be, then it does signal that you're eating enough at that point to maintain where you're at. So there you go. Linda Straub said, I have trouble sleeping with intermittent fasting. Have you experienced this? So, yes, I have from time to time had problems with my sleep. And I will go through those times. So the first thing was when I was losing weight and I was doing OMAD, there would be times where I would get in a hurry again, and I would think, like if I just eat a little bit less, like I was already losing weight, I was losing about a pound a week. I was like, but if I just eat a little bit less at my OMAD, then the weight loss will be faster. I'll be done with all this, and so I would, for a few days, I would say, okay, I'm going to eat less, and so then I would eat less at the meal. So I would not finish the meal feeling full. And what happened? I couldn't sleep. or I would sleep, but I would wake up at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would be wide awake. I mean, I would have to like get up. I would go sit on the couch. I would read, some sort of book I was reading, and then I would usually fall back asleep at some point. And I did not like that at all. And so what I realized is, for me, that was my body's signal that like I'm not eating enough. So I need to like increase my food intake if I'm not sleeping well. There have been times since that time where my sleep has gotten out of whack, but that was due to stress. Like I was waking up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and there were just stressful things going on in my life. And so I always do, the first thing I do is I'm looking at my eating, and I'm like, am I eating the right amount of food? Because I definitely want to, that's the easiest thing to change. Much easier to, increase the food intake than to figure out the stress or solve the stressful problem, which sometimes is like not something you can solve. It's just something you have to live through. So that's always been my rule. Like if I can't sleep, and I feel like I'm actually hungry, especially if in conjunction with not being able to sleep, I've also got like a nauseous kind of feeling, like I haven't eaten enough. If I'm feeling just really tired, and if I'm getting headaches, those are all other signs for me that I'm not eating enough and I need to increase the food intake. So there you go. Let's see what else we got here. Tom says, thank you for the great tips and motivation. I've been doing 16-8 for 2 months with exercise and good diet, and it's been great. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Tom. And for the kind words. Let's see. So, okay, Shirley, you asked when you first started doing the weight loss journey, how long did it take to lose the first 20 pounds? That's a great question. So my first 20 pounds, if I'm remembering correctly, I'd have to go look at my spreadsheet to really find out. But I think I lost about 20 pounds. And this was, I can't remember if I was doing my 7-day average at that time, but I'm thinking just, single day weights. And I think I hit like 202. I think the first time I saw like a 202 was in July of that year. So actually I had lost, pretty well. I didn't think it was good. I thought, oh, that's not fast enough. But then that's right around the time that I hurt my back doing that deadlift. So then the weight started to trend back up, because I was really convinced. I was like, oh, if I can't lift heavy and if I can't work out hard, I won't be able to lose weight. But I found that I think really the walking helped me with more of the emotional side, which kept me from emotionally eating. I don't know that it was really the calorie burn per se that helped me with the weight loss. That I think that was how long it took me to do the first 20 pounds. And then, like I said, to go from just above 200 down to 158, again, it was like a pound a week. So she's lost, hey, you've lost your first 5 pounds. That's something to celebrate. Like every pound, like if you can just say, I'm just focused on the next pound. Like I remember when I was at 205, I was like, okay, 204. I got to get to 204. Okay. And then it's like, once I got to 200 though, it was like, I felt like I'm never going to hit 199. Like it felt like this huge insurmountable obstacle, but I just kept thinking, no, like I was able to lose that 1 pound. So that tells me I can lose this next pound. Like I can do this. And so just keep going with it. And so she asked, how did you move forward and work past the slow process of losing weight? I am so impatient. And so that was like one of my biggest challenges, was just learning how to be patient and not be in a hurry and just say, eventually I'm going to get there. And I think that was something that really helped me to get past that. Like, it's going to be so slow. I said to myself, okay, like, let's say it takes me 5 years. Like, it takes me 5 whole years to get down to the weight I think I need to be at. Okay, at that point, I'll be 30, at that point, I think I would have been like 36. I'll be 36, and then I'll have the rest of my life, if I can get down to it the way I'm thinking, like being sustainable, then I'll be 36. Well, if it takes me that long, then I'm okay with that. And I said to myself, even if I just have to keep going with this, like, I'm going to get this weight off. I'm just going to be more stubborn than the scale. And so those things, like just lengthening out my timeline, just saying it's going to take as long as it's going to take. I think it'll probably be done in like 2 years at the max, But even if it takes 5 years, I'm okay with that. And really, I'm just not going to give up this fight, ultimately. So there you go. Let's see. Beauty of Love Jones asked, hey, do you recommend OMAD or 16-8 to help you lose weight? And what do you think about carbs? I love carbs. I love them so much. Like I am not low carb. I eat, I would say probably, if you look at like the food I eat week in and week out, like I eat a good many carbs. I have a family of 5. We are on a budget. Like eating lots and lots of protein, that's great and everything, but it costs a lot of money. Or at least, I mean, we eat beans and rice, that's protein, but it's also a lot of carbs. But I don't limit them. I don't count them. I don't look at them. I eat the food that I like. I do cook most of our food from scratch, or, I do buy things like, boxed, like dried spaghetti noodles and jarred sauce. That will be a meal basically every week. But as far as like, I don't buy a lot of prepackaged like convenience foods, again, because they're more expensive. So I just, make a lot of stuff from scratch. But we eat a lot of pasta, rice, all those types of things. So, let's see. So that's my personal philosophy on carbs. But will a 16-8 help you lose weight? Yes. And OMAD, which one's better? The one you can stick with. That's always the best intermittent fasting plan, is whatever you can stick with. Because, like for me, OMAD worked great, in my life at that time. There have been times since that time where it really wouldn't have worked that well. My kids got older. It was funny, when my kids were the age they were when I was doing OMAD, they didn't care. Like, they didn't even realize I was just eating 1 meal a day. As they got older, like, my son would be like, hey, will you eat lunch with me? It's like, okay, this is new. So yeah, I mean, I will. And so I had to learn, like, okay, so it's not always going to be OMAD. In maintenance, I'll do these other things, just like I'll do a window, or, just save 2 meals a day, or whatever the thing is. And all of it can work. Again, because I don't think that any of this is magic. It's not like, oh, well, it's just this magic thing that happens if you only eat 1 meal a day. I firmly believe it's like, if you eat the same amount of food at that 1 meal, but just break that apart and, spread it out throughout the day, you're still going to have the same kind of weight loss results. And really the one that works best in your life it's such a big deal that it fits in your life, because I've done the stuff where it's like, you're not eating, the same food as your family, or, it's so stressful to me. I really didn't like that. And I found it miserable. And you can be miserable for a while, but eventually you get tired of being miserable, and then you go off the plan. So I find it's really helpful to just ask yourself honestly, okay, would I like a 16-8 better, or would I like OMAD better? And what would work better in my life? And then pick that and see what your results are. And don't do things you're going to resent. Okay. All right. Kevin Fitzpatrick said, I listened to the audiobook and a bunch of videos. Awesome. Yeah, there's like over 170 videos that I've made on this channel, so I kind of think I've covered it all at this point, but I still try to put some stuff out there. Just wondering if I have to hit a minimum number of calories in the 1 meal. Well, here's the thing about that. Well, I was going to say it depends, because ultimately, what I've seen is, there is kind of a minimum there, that if people go under that, you're just not going to feel good. Like, you're not going to feel good, and if you don't feel good, that's not good. Like, it's going to be like this negative spiral, where you're not going to feel like getting up, and you're going to stop moving as much. Like when you're not eating enough, and you're just kind of, well, then you don't feel like going out on your walk. Well, okay, if you're just laying around and not, being active or productive, then that can really lead to a lot of stress eating. So you might be still doing intermittent fasting, but then you might be eating too much, or even OMAD. You could overeat on OMAD. But I, and I don't know how many calories I've been getting. Again, I don't count them, so I don't really know. But I've always just gone by, how do I feel? So if I feel good, so I feel like I've got plenty of energy when I'm doing OMAD, especially, like, do I feel full at the end of the meal? That's the first checkpoint. Yes, I feel good at the end of the meal. If I start to feel hungry really shortly thereafter, I know I haven't eaten enough. So I would eat more. I would eat a little bit more. And this is like one of those, it's a fine line kind of thing for me. Like, it was like, okay, if I eat past this certain point, my weight will not go down. But if I eat just the right amount, it will go down. But if I eat too little, then I have negative symptoms afterwards, and that's not good either. So I would say really pay attention to how satiated you feel after the meal. So that's something too, like, I would say, everybody has their strengths. My strength is I can eat a lot of food. So, but not everybody can eat that much at one meal. And, and I think there's certainly something to be said in a very positive way for just the learning how to eat the right amount of food throughout the day. Without, definitely with a longer eating window. So if you find you can't seem to get the right amount of food in, and like maybe your weight's going down too quickly too, then I would say just go with what works. So have a longer eating window. Sometimes people get really like, oh, I got to do OMAD because that's what this person did. It's like, it really just depends on you. What can you do? What can you stick with? What do you feel good with? Some people hate OMAD. Some people are like, oh, like I feel miserable afterwards. Like I'm way, like in order to eat enough, I feel ridiculously stuffed, and like I have heartburn, and that's not good. Like, so I guess I'm just blessed with like the ability to eat a large amount of food that's not too much food, and so I think everybody's built differently on as far as that goes. So go with how you feel, I think. Mike D says, I was fasting this morning trying to do OMAD today. I felt a surge of energy this morning. Then around 9 a.m. I felt so tired. I decided to have a lifesaver, bounce back. Yeah. So, I mean, that's something too. Some people really have a hard time with fasting. Like my husband, and he is a skinny guy, and he is, and he's never had a weight problem ever, but he, like, his legs will get shaky and stuff if he fasts for too long. And it's just harder on his body. So I think it's good, Mike, that you're like, okay, I need a lifesaver, and I always, I should say this too, because I talked about being consistent and all this stuff, but there were exceptions to that, just rare exceptions, but it did happen. So like you were talking about like needing a lifesaver. Well, my husband started to notice, and this was like back in 2015, like, okay, well, about a few days before that time of the month for me, he would be like, you need a Snickers. Like, you're being mean right now. So, and so we started this thing called my emergency chocolate, and he would just, bring me a little bit of chocolate, a few days before. And occasionally I would just do that. It wasn't all the time. It wasn't necessarily every month, but it was something that I allowed myself to have if I needed it. Again, it goes back, I think, to just like realizing when you need something and giving yourself what you need. Let's see here. All right. Thanks for joining us, Kevin. Okay, Shirley. I just gained 20 pounds in 6 months. I just lost 5 pounds. All right. And you're trying to be cognizant about that. It is difficult. Like, 20 pounds in 6 months, that's about a pound a week. Weight can really creep on, but it can also creep off, and I think to me, that's a lot more helpful to just think of it as being like this gradual thing that happens in either direction, depending on what your actions are. Anyway, that's how I do it in my head. Let's see. Hello from Canada. Oh, thank you very much, Wendy. That is very kind of you. I try to live my life as if I don't have this YouTube channel. I know that sounds weird, but because I really do want to be authentic as far as like, I don't want to do like something like stay with OMAD because it's like, well, but I've got that channel called 6 Miles to Supper, so like I can't ever go back to just eating like however many meals a day or having a longer eating window. So I try to pretend like, okay, I don't have that channel. What am I actually going to do? Nobody's watching you. What are you doing? And so that's how I really do try to live my life that way. So, okay. Hi from India. Oh, hi, Uma. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I haven't added any episodes in a while. I'm gonna try to get back to that. Okay, she says she's struggling to lose weight at age 51. The weight is 75 kilograms and still cycling. Okay. Okay, so I'm wondering, let's see, 75 kilograms. I'm going to have to quickly, I think it's like 75 times 2.2. Is that right? I'm terrible at remembering. Okay, so that's like 165 pounds. Okay, I don't know how tall you are. Because that actually makes a really big difference depending on how tall are you, because that might be overweight or it might not be, but if you're struggling to lose weight, what I would say is you have to try things until you find something that works. So how do you even start? Like, how do you even know what you can try? What worked for me was, first of all, figuring out what do I think I could stick with for the long haul. So I was thinking in terms of like, okay, could I do intermittent fasting for the rest of my life? And I thought, I think I could. Like, I wasn't sure about OMAD. Actually, I didn't even know OMAD was a thing, but I thought I could skip breakfast. I know that. And basically, if you just skip breakfast, you'll end up with a pretty good window as long as you're cutting your eating off at a certain time. So I said, okay, I think I can do that. And the way I started out with intermittent fasting was just learning how to do intermittent fasting. So I started pushing I told myself, okay, I'm not going to eat past 10 p.m. and I won't eat before 6 a.m. That was an 8-hour window. And I know that most people will be like, that's not even intermittent fasting, but I just needed to learn how to like have rules for myself. And so then I started just pushing the windows, I would cut off my eating a little bit earlier, and I start my eating a little bit later in the day. And over time, I started to lose weight, but it's like you kind of just have to move through this process and start to see where you have results. Like some people, they get to say like a 12-12 and they have great results there. It makes it so they're, just eating the right amount of food, and it gives them enough of like guardrails so that they end up losing weight. But what it really comes down to is just learning how to eat the amount of food that you need in order to lose weight. And I do understand, Uma, that metabolism does slow down as you age. And so, I've heard from lots and lots of women who, they talk about it. They're like, it just gets more difficult. And I think the science bears that out too. Like as far as your metabolism decreases, your muscle mass decreases as you get older. Not that you're old, you're certainly not old at all. But I am saying that's just a factor. But despite that, I've had lots of people who have emailed me or who have commented on these lives, and they'll be like in their 70s, and they'll say, they've started doing intermittent fasting and they were able to lose the weight that they needed to lose. So I think it's just a matter of just keep going with it. And be patient. Just really be super duper patient, and know that it's probably going to take you a while. It'll probably take a while to figure out what works. And even when you find out what works, it's a matter of being consistent, and it's a matter of just being patient with your body and letting the weight kind of just slowly creep off your body. So, yeah. So, okay. Well, I think we've basically covered it. I appreciate you guys joining me for this live for February. We're in February. That's hard to believe. January was like really fast to me. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate all the questions, and I hope it was helpful. And like I said, there are like 170 videos on this channel where I feel like I've covered all the bases. Also have the podcast, 6milestosupper.com/podcast, or you can get that wherever you get your podcast. Any of the podcasting apps, you should just be able to search for 6 Miles to Supper, and you can listen to it there, or you can listen to it on my website. I also write articles on my website, 6milestosupper.com/blog. There's lots of free resources on there that I've put together, various, printable things. You can download my weight tracking spreadsheet if you like spreadsheets, that will automatically average your weight for you. So yeah. And also I've got these books, Layback Guide to Intermittent Fasting, which we talked about before. Overcoming weight loss obstacles. I did this book more about like the hard parts of weight loss, those things that are kind of trickier to navigate. And this is my fiction book. I wrote a young adult fiction novel called Escape from Olszek's Castle. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate all you guys, and I wish you success on the weight loss journey. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.